My sister moved in after losing everything, then tried to take my house. I was in the middle of fixing a customer's laptop when my phone buzzed on the workbench. I almost ignored it, but something made me glance at the screen. It was my sister, Emily. We hadn't talked in months, and seeing her name there gave me a weird feeling in my gut. I wiped my hands on my jeans and answered. Her voice was shaky, like she just finished crying or maybe was still at it. She said their house had burned down. A fire, out of nowhere, everything gone. She, Trevor, and their 2 kids had nowhere to go. She didn't even ask me directly, just laid it out there and let the silence do the work. I rubbed my temple and took a deep breath. Emily always knew how to get what she wanted without actually saying it. Growing up, she could cry on cue if it meant avoiding chores or getting out of trouble. But this, a fire, that wasn't something you could fake. And I could hear the kids sniffling in the background, so I told her she could bring the family over for a little while, just until they got back on their feet. I even said it out loud, a month, tops. She promised it wouldn't even take that long. The relief in her voice was almost convincing. When I hung up, I sat there for a minute, trying to shake the uneasy feeling. My dad used to say that helping family is what decent people do. Mom had a whole mantra: family sticks together, no matter what. I guess those lessons stuck. That night, I explained the situation to my son, Alex. He's 10 but sharp for his age. He asked how long they'd stay, and I repeated the promise Emily had made. They showed up the next day in a beat-up minivan stuffed with mismatched bags and plastic bins. Emily stepped out first, sunglasses perched on her head, looking more like someone arriving for a long weekend than a person who'd lost her home. Trevor didn't even bother getting out to say hello at first, just sat behind the wheel scrolling on his phone. The kids piled out, quiet and wide-eyed. I helped carry their stuff inside, while Emily narrated the story of the fire. How they'd been out for dinner, how the neighbors called when they saw smoke, how the fire department said it started from faulty wiring. I nodded along, though some details didn't sit right. The place had been a rental, and I remembered Emily mentioning the landlord refused to fix things. Still, the whole thing sounded like she was reciting lines she'd practiced. The next morning, I found Trevor sprawled on my couch, TV remote in hand, already flipping through channels like he owned the place. The coffee table was littered with empty soda cans and half-eaten donuts. When I mentioned the mess, he just grunted and turned up the volume. I stood there for a second, then shrugged and headed to the kitchen. I figured, give it a day or two, maybe the shock was still wearing off. Emily, on the other hand, made herself right at home. By day 3, she'd reorganized the living room to make it cozier, which really meant pushing my recliner into a corner and replacing my baseball memorabilia with her scented candles and framed inspirational quotes. I didn't say much. Alex found it funny, whispering to me that the house smelled like a mall's candle section. Dinner became a circus. Emily insisted on family meals, which sounded nice until she decided that takeout was the best option every night. My kitchen trash filled up with greasy pizza boxes and burger wrappers faster than I could take it out. Trevor, meanwhile, shared his theories about making quick money. Everything from flipping vintage video games to starting a podcast for dudes who just tell it like it is. I nodded along, biting my tongue. One evening, I overheard Emily on the phone with Mom. She was laying it on thick, saying how grateful she was for my help, how she just needed a bit more time. But her tone had that familiar edge, the one she used when she wanted something more than she admitted. That first week felt like a month, and the promise of just a month started to sound more like a suggestion than a plan. That night, I stood at the top of the stairs listening. The guest room door was open just a crack. Emily was whispering to Trevor. Her voice was soft but clear enough to make out. "Just for a month," she said. "He'll believe that." I turned away, my stomach tightening. I wanted to believe her, but something in the way she said it, like she was already planning something more, made me feel like I'd just invited a storm into my home. I went back to my room and lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling. 1 month. I repeated it to myself like a promise. But deep down, I already knew promises didn't mean much to Emily, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something I wasn't ready for. The first week passed like a slow-motion train wreck. I kept telling myself that it was temporary, that family helps family, and that in a few weeks I'd have my home back to normal. But by week 2, I realized I might have been a little too optimistic. Emily had made herself at home in ways I hadn't expected. One morning, I came downstairs to find the living room completely rearranged. My recliner was shoved into a corner, the coffee table replaced by some wicker monstrosity she must have dragged in from the garage, and the TV was mounted higher up on the wall. Apparently so it was better for everyone's necks. She stood there, arms crossed, beaming like she'd just won an interior design contest. I bit back the urge to argue. After all, it was just furniture, right? Trevor, on the other hand, had fully embraced the art of couch occupation. Every evening, I'd walk in from work to find him sprawled across the sofa with a beer in one hand and the remote in the other. He had an impressive ability to monopolize the TV with shows about gold mining and conspiracy theories. The guy could sit for hours without moving, except to crack open another beer. I half expected him to sprout roots into the upholstery. The kids weren't much better. My son, Alex, tried his best to be patient, but having 2 hyperactive cousins tearing through the house like caffeinated squirrels wore on him. His toys were scattered across the living room. His books were missing pages, and his once tidy bedroom now looked like a war zone. One afternoon, I found him sitting on the stairs with his arms crossed, watching as his cousins used his Lego set to build a destruction robot that promptly smashed into the wall. "Dad," he said, voice low, "are they staying forever?" I gave him a reassuring squeeze on the shoulder and said no. But inside, I wasn't so sure anymore. Emily's temporary stay started feeling permanent. She organized the kitchen cabinets, replacing my coffee mugs with matching sets she bought on a quick trip to Target. She started making grocery lists for me and casually mentioned splitting utilities. Now that we're all living here, I didn't remember agreeing to that. One evening, I caught Trevor trying to hook up a second cable box in the guest room. When I asked what he was doing, he shrugged and said he needed his own space to chill. I suggested a walk outside for fresh air. He rolled his eyes and went back to fiddling with the cables. The next morning, the kitchen smelled like burnt toast, and Trevor was already parked in front of the TV in his sweatpants. I asked him if he planned on doing anything productive. He muttered something about needing time to recalibrate. I guess sitting on my couch all day was his version of recalibration. Later that evening, Emily stood in the living room with her hands on her hips, looking around like she was about to make another design change. "I think we need more shelves," she said, "for the kids' stuff." "More shelves?" I asked. "We barely have space for the ones we already have." "We'll figure it out," she said with a shrug. "It's just, we need to make the space work for everyone." The word "we" hit me like a bucket of cold water. It was becoming clear that Emily saw the situation as more permanent than I did. I gave her a tight nod and walked away before I said something I'd regret. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering how my house had turned into a free-for-all. I could hear Trevor's laugh echoing from the living room, the kids running down the hall, and Emily talking loudly on her phone about needing more family time. My home didn't feel like mine anymore. I told myself it was just a rough patch, that soon they'd get back on their feet and move out. But deep down, I knew better. I just couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing control of the one place that was supposed to be mine. The worst part, I had a growing suspicion that Emily knew it too, and was perfectly fine with it. The utility bills hit like a punch to the gut. I stood at the kitchen counter staring at the water bill, my brain refusing to process the number at the bottom. It was triple the usual amount. The gas and electricity bills weren't much better. I rubbed my temples, trying to figure out how 4 extra people could cause such a spike. Then I remembered the nightly hot tub sessions Emily had introduced as family relaxation time. Trevor never turned off the lights, the TV ran nonstop, and the dishwasher seemed to operate on a continuous loop. I opened the fridge, hoping to find a can of soda to cool my nerves. Instead, I was met with empty shelves and a lone ketchup bottle tipped on its side. The groceries I'd stocked just 3 days ago were gone. The kids had discovered a newfound passion for midnight snacks, and Emily had taken to making fun brunches with pancake stacks that could feed a small army. I closed the fridge and sat down at the table, calculating in my head how long I could keep this up. That evening, when Emily strolled into the kitchen, I cleared my throat. "Hey, can we talk for a minute?" She tilted her head, pulling out her phone mid-scroll. "Sure. What's up?" "The bills," I said, tapping the thick stack of envelopes on the table. "They're through the roof. And groceries. I just can't keep up. I need you guys to pitch in a bit. Maybe split the utilities for now." She sighed dramatically and slid her phone into her back pocket. "Mike, come on. We're still trying to recover from that fire. You know what it's like to start over. We're in a rough spot." "Yeah, I get that," I said, biting back my frustration. "But we're all in a rough spot here." She gave me a practiced sad smile and placed a hand on my shoulder. "Just give us a little more time. Family helps family, right?" I wanted to argue, to tell her how I drained my savings account just keeping the pantry stocked and the lights on. But instead, I nodded and let it go. Again. Later that night, I heard Trevor talking on the phone from the living room. His voice was low, but the words caught my attention. "Nah, man, it's a sure thing," he said. "Real estate's booming. Just gotta find the right buyer. Quick turnaround. Easy cash." I leaned against the wall, heart racing. What kind of scheme was he cooking up this time? The last easy cash idea had been some cryptocurrency gamble that left Emily selling off jewelry to cover their rent. The next morning, I found a brightly colored flyer on the kitchen table. "Fast cash for your home. No repairs needed. Call today." My name and address were handwritten at the bottom. I stared at it, pulse quickening. Trevor's voice from the night before echoed in my mind. Quick turnaround. Easy cash. The coffee maker burbled in the background as I tried to wrap my head around it. I could hear the kids arguing upstairs over whose turn it was to play on Alex's gaming console. Alex walked into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes and yawning. "Dad, why is Uncle Trevor always talking about houses?" I forced a smile. "Not sure, buddy. Maybe he's trying to be a realtor." Alex shrugged and grabbed a bowl of cereal, but his question stuck with me. That evening, I noticed Trevor outside by the mailbox. Phone pressed his ear. His voice carried through the cool night air. "Yeah, man," he said, "they don't even know what's coming. Just a couple more steps, and we're set." I watched from the window, every instinct screaming that something wasn't right. Trevor never worked hard at anything unless it involved quick cash. And now, my house seemed to be part of whatever game he was playing. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee, trying to shake the sense of dread. Emily breezed in with a big smile, announcing she'd found the cutest shelves online for the kids' toys. I barely heard her. My eyes kept drifting to the flyer still sitting on the table. "Hey, Mike," she said, snapping me out of my thoughts. "We're gonna make this work, right? Family sticks together." "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "We'll figure it out." But deep down, I wasn't so sure. The knock on the door came just as I was scraping the last of the peanut butter from the jar to make Alex a sandwich. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and opened the door to find my parents standing there, both wearing matching expressions of concern and determination. Mom clutched a casserole dish, her usual peace offering when delivering bad news, while Dad gave me a half-hearted smile. "Surprise," Mom chirped, stepping inside before I could respond. "We thought we'd drop by and see how everyone's holding up." I forced a smile and stepped aside. "Come on in." Alex peeked around the corner and gave a small wave before disappearing back upstairs. He'd learned long ago that family visits usually meant adult conversations and passive-aggressive lectures. We settled into the living room, the couch still sagging from Trevor's daily occupation. Mom placed a casserole on the coffee table and clasped her hands together. "Michael, sweetheart," she began, using the tone she reserved for conversations where she already knew the outcome. Emily told us about the bills and the challenges. I shifted in my seat. "Yeah, it's been a lot." I rubbed the back of my neck. "I've been covering everything for months." "She just needs more time," Mom said, her eyes pleading. "You know how hard this has been on her, losing everything like that." "She didn't lose everything," I said. "She lost a rented house with faulty wiring and bad plumbing. Now she's here, living rent-free and turning my house into a circus." Dad coughed awkwardly, but Mom leaned in. "Michael, family sticks together. You remember how your Uncle Dave helped us when we were struggling?" "Yeah, for 2 weeks. Not 3 months," I said, voice tightening. "It's different now," she insisted. "Emily's got the kids to think about, and I've Alex to think about." I shot back. "I'm running out of money, patience, and frankly, space." Mom's lips pressed into a thin line. "We just want you to remember what matters most. Family." The conversation ended with Mom patting my hand, saying she'd pray for clarity. Dad just gave me a helpless shrug before following her out the door. That night, I sat on the back porch, trying to unwind. The stars were out, the air crisp. Inside, I heard laughter from the living room. Trevor, probably watching another of his treasure-hunting shows. Emily's voice drifted in and out, bubbly and carefree. "Dad." Alex's voice startled me. He slid into the chair beside me, knees pulled to his chest. "Can I tell you something?" "Of course, buddy," I said, sitting up. "I saw Aunt Emily in your office," he said, hesitating. "She was looking through your desk. She took some papers and put them in her purse." My stomach dropped. "When was this?" "Yesterday, after she told me to go outside and play." I stood up, heart racing. Alex's eyes widened. "Did I do something wrong?" "No, buddy. You did great telling me." I went inside, moving quietly through the house. The door to my office was closed, which was unusual. I opened it and flicked on the light. My desk drawer was slightly open, files shifted out of place. I sat down and flipped through them. The paperwork for my mortgage was missing. The flyer from the real estate company, the one promising fast cash, lay on top of the desk. My name was circled in red ink. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence as the weight of the situation settled over me. I could hear the TV droning from the living room and the faint sound of Trevor laughing at something ridiculous. I heard footsteps behind me and turned. Emily stood in the doorway, holding a cup of tea. Her smile was thin and unconvincing. "Looking for something?" she asked, voice light. "Yeah," I said, holding up the flyer. "Want to tell me why my name's on this?" Her eyes flicked to the paper, then back to me. "It's nothing," she said with a laugh. "Just an idea Trevor had. You know, in case you needed extra cash." "That's funny," I said, voice cold, "because Alex said you were digging through my desk." Her smile faltered. "You're overreacting, Mike." "Maybe," I said, standing. "But I think it's time we have a real conversation about what you're really doing here." Her eyes narrowed just slightly, and for the first time I saw it, the calculation behind the smile. I had the distinct feeling that the rough patch was just a cover for something much bigger and much more dangerous. She quickly turned away, muttering something about me being paranoid, and walked off, avoiding the conversation entirely. I stood there, gripping the paper in my hand, knowing that whatever this was, it wasn't over yet. The morning after discovering the missing mortgage documents, I sat at the kitchen table nursing a lukewarm cup of coffee and trying to make sense of it all. My mind raced through every conversation, every odd moment over the past few weeks. I knew Emily was up to something, but this was a whole new level. Emily walked in, dressed in her usual yoga pants and oversized sweatshirt, holding a mug that read World's Best Aunt. A gift she bought for herself, by the way. She gave me a cheerful smile. "Morning, big brother. You look like you've seen a ghost." I set my coffee down and leaned forward. "Emily, I need to ask you something. What were you doing in my office?" Her smile froze, then shifted into an exaggerated expression of shock. "Excuse me? Are you actually accusing me of what? Snooping through your stuff?" "Alex saw you," I said, voice steady. "He told me you took papers from my desk." Her mouth opened, then closed. She let out a short laugh and placed her hand dramatically over her chest. "Wow, Mike. I can't believe you're letting a 10-year-old's imagination turn you against your own sister. I mean, seriously? Family doesn't spy on each other. Family also doesn't steal mortgage papers." I shot back. Her face darkened for just a second, but she quickly replaced the expression with a pout. "I can't believe this. After everything we've been through, you're suspicious of me? Me, your own sister? Fine. If that's how you feel, I'll stay out of your precious office." She stormed out of the kitchen, her footsteps heavy on the stairs. I sat there, knowing full well that her indignation wasn't real. It was a performance, perfected over decades. A few hours later, I stepped outside to clear my head. The sound of running water caught my attention. I walked toward the backyard and stopped cold. Trevor stood there with a garden hose, filling an above-ground pool. The thing was massive, easily 20 feet across, with a rainbow-colored slide attached to one side. "Trevor," I called, voice tight. "What the hell is that?" He grinned and gave me a thumbs up. Surprise. Figured the kids needed some fun for the summer. In my yard? Without asking me? Relax, man. It's just a pool. It'll raise your property value. You're welcome. I turned and walked back inside before I said something I'd regret. That afternoon, I visited my neighbor, Mrs. Carter, a retired teacher who'd lived next door for decades. We stood on her porch sipping lemonade while her dachshund, Pepper, barked at squirrels. "So," I said casually, "have you noticed anything weird about my sister?" Mrs. Carter raised an eyebrow. "Oh, honey, I try not to gossip, but since you asked, she was talking to the Johnsons last week, bragging about how she and Trevor were finally going to have their own place. Said it was just a matter of paperwork now." My heart dropped. She said that. "Clear as day," Mrs. Carter confirmed. "I thought you were selling the place." "I'm not," I said, pulse racing. Back home, I yanked open the mailbox. Amid the usual junk mail and bills, one envelope stood out, official looking, from the county recorder's office. My hands trembled as I opened it. "Request for transfer of property title," it read. My name was listed as the current owner. Emily's name was listed under new applicant. The room spun around me. I gripped the edge of the counter, the paper crumpling in my hand. Emily and Trevor weren't just freeloading. They were trying to steal my home. The next morning, I poured a cup of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, watching Emily cheerfully make pancakes as if nothing had happened. Trevor was already outside by the pool, yelling into his phone about getting the paperwork finalized. Alex came downstairs, rubbing his eyes. "Dad, why are Aunt Emily and Uncle Trevor talking about living here forever?" I ruffled his hair, forcing a smile. "Don't worry, buddy. I'm on it." As I stood up, my gaze landed on the mortgage letter, still crumpled on the table. My sister had crossed a line, and I was done playing nice. The moment I stepped into the attorney's office, the weight of the situation hit me like a sledgehammer. The place smelled of old books and fresh coffee, and the man across from me, Mr. Thompson, looked like he'd seen every scam in the book. I slid the letter across the desk. He adjusted his glasses and skimmed the document. He muttered, flipping to the second page. This signature is supposed to be yours? Yeah, I said, but I never sign anything. I figured, he said, tapping the paper. This is a sloppy forgery. Your sister tried to use a quitclaim deed to transfer ownership of the property to herself. If the county office hadn't flagged it, she might have pulled it off. My stomach churned. So what do we do now? We'll file a formal complaint, Thompson said. This will block any further action on her part. I'll send a notice of fraud to the title company and county recorder's office. I nodded, relief mixing with disbelief. She really tried to steal my house. Family can surprise you, Thompson said with a shrug. Not always in good ways. That evening, I walked into the house and found Emily sitting on the couch with a glass of wine, scrolling through her phone. Trevor was in his usual spot, sprawled across the recliner, TV blaring a reality show about storage unit auctions. We need to talk, I said, keeping my voice steady. Emily didn't even look up. If this is about your paranoid obsession with paperwork, spare me. You forged my signature, I said. I talked to a lawyer. Her eyes snapped up, and she sat straighter. What lawyer? Doesn't matter, I said. You tried to steal my house. I've filed a complaint. You're done here. Emily's lips curled into a smirk. You think a piece of paper will stop us? Pack your stuff, I said, voice low. You and Trevor need to leave. She stood and took a step toward me. Leave, she said, mockingly. Oh, Mike, you still don't get it, do you? You're the one who's leaving. This house? It's ours now. Trevor chuckled from the recliner. Relax, dude, he said, swirling his beer can. Survival of the fittest. That's just how the world works. I clenched my fists. My vision blurred at the edges, but a soft sob from the staircase cut through the fog. Alex stood there, tears streaming down his face. Come on, buddy, I said, voice shaky. I led him upstairs, tucked him into bed, and sat beside him until his breathing steadied. When I finally left his room, I dialed my mom. The phone rang twice before she picked up. Mom, I said, struggling to keep my voice calm. Emily forged a document to steal my house. I've filed a complaint. I need you to understand how serious this is. There was a pause. Michael, she said with a sigh, you've always had such a flair for the dramatic. I'm sure Emily didn't mean any harm. You know how hard things have been for her. She committed fraud, Mom. Family sticks together, she said softly. Don't make this bigger than it is. I stared at the phone, disbelief coursing through me. Mom, she tried to steal my house, I repeated. Oh, honey, she said with a sigh. I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding. Emily said you've been really stressed lately. Maybe take a step back and get some perspective. I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. Goodbye, Mom, I said and hung up. The next morning, I opened the front door to grab the newspaper and froze. A crisp white envelope was wedged beneath the welcome mat. Notice of eviction hearing, it read. Filed by Emily Thompson. She was taking me to court to kick me out of my own home. The moment I put down the eviction notice, I grabbed my phone and called Mr. Thompson. We need to meet, I said, voice tight with frustration. Emily filed for an eviction hearing. 2 hours later, I was sitting in his office again, the hum of an old desk fan filling the silence as he reviewed the new paperwork. He frowned and shook his head. Your sister is claiming there was an oral agreement, he said. She says you promised to give her the house. That's ridiculous, I said, gripping the chair's armrest. There's no way a court would believe that, right? Oral agreements can be tricky, he admitted, but without written proof, her case is weak. We'll need supporting evidence to show her intent to deceive. That night, as I sat in the living room trying to gather my thoughts, Alex came downstairs, his eyes wide. Dad, I remembered something, he said, clutching his favorite stuffed shark. What is it, buddy? I heard Aunt Emily talking to Uncle Trevor a while ago, he said. She said, We're gonna get that house. We just need to push him a little more. And then she laughed. My jaw tightened. You're sure? He nodded. Yeah. She said, we'll get it. We'll. I hugged Alex and told him he'd help more than he knew. The next day, I started collecting everything I could, utility bills, receipts, and old messages from Emily complaining about their financial struggles. I visited Mrs. Carter next door, who agreed to write a statement about the time she overheard Emily bragging about getting the house soon. My buddy Jack, who worked in tech, helped me comb through social media. And there it was, a post from Emily, public for the world to see. A picture of her and Trevor standing in front of my house with the caption, "So grateful for Trevor and his hard work. Can't wait to start our new chapter in our new home." I sent the screenshot to Mr. Thompson. He responded within minutes. Perfect. See you in court. The morning of the hearing, my stomach churned as we entered the courtroom. Emily and Trevor sat across from us. Emily wore a conservative dress, hair pinned back, face set in a mask of sorrow. Trevor slouched beside her in a wrinkled polo shirt. The judge, a stern-looking woman with glasses perched on the end of her nose, called the case to order. Emily went first. Your Honor, she began, voice trembling. My brother promised me this house when we lost ours in the fire. He said family comes first. I never would have gone through all this trouble if I didn't believe in his word. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she dabbed at them with a tissue. I almost believed her myself. Do you have any written agreement? The judge asked. Emily shook her head. No, it was a family promise. Mr. Thompson stood. Your Honor, we have evidence that Miss Thompson and her husband attempted to forge documents to claim this property. He handed over the paperwork with my falsified signature. The judge examined it, frowning. Ms. Thompson, can you explain this? Emily shifted uncomfortably. I don't know. Trevor handled the paperwork. Mr. Thompson, the judge said, addressing Trevor, did you forge this document? Trevor squirmed, eyes darting around the room. She said we needed it. Mr. Thompson, the judge said, voice sharp, did you forge this document? Yes, he blurted. But it was her idea. Emily gasped, spinning to glare at him. You idiot. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs. The judge banged her gavel. Order. She turned to me. Mr. Thompson, it's clear this was a calculated attempt to commit fraud. The document is invalid, and this eviction case is dismissed. Relief flooded through me. Emily sat frozen. Disbelief etched across her face. Trevor slumped forward, head in his hands. The judge continued, additionally, this case may be referred to the district attorney for possible criminal charges related to the fraudulent filing. Emily's face drained of color. Outside the courthouse, Alex hugged me tight. We did it, Dad. Yeah, buddy, I said, forcing a smile. We won this round. But I knew my sister well enough to realize this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The morning after the court ruling, I stood in my kitchen sipping coffee and staring at the eviction paperwork. My lawyer had filed the necessary documents, and the sheriff's office scheduled the eviction for the following Tuesday. I should have felt relieved, but instead, my stomach twisted with anxiety. Emily and Trevor had spent weeks turning my home into their personal playground. They'd lied, manipulated, and tried to steal what I'd worked years to build. And now, with the eviction order in place, it was almost over. Almost. Tuesday morning arrived with a clear blue sky and a tension so thick it was hard to breathe. I watched from the porch as the sheriff's car pulled up. 2 officers stepped out, one tall and broad, the other shorter with a clipboard in hand. Morning, the taller officer said, adjusting his sunglasses. Michael Thompson? That's me, I said, heart hammering. We're here for the eviction. I nodded and gestured toward the house. They're still inside. The officers walked up to the door, knocked firmly, and waited. No answer. The shorter officer knocked again. After a minute, Trevor opened the door, hair disheveled, eyes bloodshot. "Morning, sir," the officer said. "We have a court order for eviction. You need to gather your belongings and vacate the premises." "This is ridiculous," Trevor muttered, rubbing his face. "We got kids, man." "I understand," the officer said, voice calm. "But this is a legal order. You have 30 minutes to gather essentials." Emily appeared behind Trevor, eyes frantic. "You're a monster, Mike," she screamed, stepping onto the porch. "How could you do this to your own family? We trusted you." I said nothing. The neighbors were already gathering on their lawns, whispering and watching. Mrs. Carter stood at the edge of her driveway, arms crossed, her small dachshund barking at the commotion. Trevor stomped back inside. Emily stood there, breathing heavily. "Mom and Dad were right about you," she spat. "Selfish. Cold. Grab your things, Emily," I said quietly. Inside the house, the kids cried as they packed their backpacks. I felt a pang of guilt, but reminded myself of the months of manipulation and the fraudulent documents. This wasn't on me. When the officers reappeared at the door, Emily was dragging a suitcase, Trevor hauling 2 duffel bags. The kids shuffled behind them, clinging to their parents. As they walked to the car, Emily stopped and turned to face me. "You're no brother of mine," she shouted. "You've ruined us." Trevor smirked. "Enjoy your empty house, buddy." The officers helped load the luggage into the back of the van. As Emily opened the trunk, a cardboard box tipped over, spilling its contents onto the pavement. I froze. Designer handbags, expensive sneakers, and unopened electronics tumbled out. The same woman who'd sobbed in court about being broke had been shopping like a lottery winner. The neighbors murmured louder. Mrs. Carter let out a low whistle. So much for being down and out, she said to no one in particular. Emily scrambled to shove the items back into the box. Face flushed. Trevor swore under his breath. The sheriff's deputy bent down, picked up a receipt, and handed it to me. The date was from 2 weeks prior, after she'd begged me to cover the electric bill. The total? Over $3,000 spent at a high-end electronics store. "Looks like the financial hardship was selective," the deputy muttered. I stood there, clutching the receipt as their van pulled away. Emily glared at me through the window, her lips moving silently. I didn't need to hear the words to know what she was saying. "This isn't over." As I turned back to the house, Alex came to my side. "Dad, are they really gone?" "Yeah, buddy," I said, putting an arm around him. "They're gone." But as I looked at the scattered receipts in my hand, I couldn't shake the feeling that Emily wasn't finished yet. The house felt unnaturally quiet after Emily and Trevor were gone. No more crashing footsteps from their kids sprinting through the halls. No more late-night TV blaring from the living room. Just silence, thick, unfamiliar, and oddly comforting. Alex sat on the couch, fiddling with a Lego set. "It feels weird," he said, not looking up. "Like, too empty." I ruffled his hair as I sat beside him. "Yeah, buddy, it does. But weird isn't always bad." We spent that weekend reclaiming the house. I found empty snack wrappers stuffed into couch cushions, broken toys wedged behind the TV, and a mysterious stain on the guest room carpet that defied explanation. Alex took charge of disinfecting his bedroom, armed with antibacterial wipes and a sense of purpose. By Sunday evening, the house smelled of lemon cleaner and pizza grease. We collapsed onto the couch, exhausted but satisfied. "I forgot how big it is," Alex said, stretching his legs across the cushions. "Me too," I admitted. "Feels like we got a brand new house." Without the extra noise, Alex added with a grin. "The next morning, Mom called. I almost didn't pick up, but figured it was time to face it. 'Michael, honey,' she began, her voice thick with forced cheer. 'Your dad and I have been talking, and we just wanted to apologize. For Emily.' I leaned against the counter and rubbed my eyes. Apologize? Well, she made some bad choices," Mom continued. "But she's family. And family forgives. She tried to steal my house, Mom. She was desperate, she said softly. You know how hard it was for her after the fire. Mom, she bought designer bags and electronics while I paid the bills, I said, voice rising. Desperation didn't drive her. Greed did. Silence stretched across the line. We just hoped you'd find it in your heart to move past it, she said finally. I can move on, I said, jaw tightening. But I'm done being the family safety net. Next time Emily falls, she can catch herself. Michael, gotta go, Mom. I hung up, took a deep breath, and exhaled slowly. Later that night, Alex sat beside me at the kitchen table as we sorted through leftover bills and paperwork. Dad, he said after a while, are we ever going to help anyone like that again? I paused, weighing my words. Yeah, buddy, I said eventually. We'll help people who really need it. People who respect the help they get. He nodded, seeming satisfied. Like when Mrs. Carter needed help with her roof. Exactly, I said, smiling. That's what family and neighbors are really about. As I tucked him into bed later, he squeezed my hand. I'm glad it's just us again. Me too, buddy, I whispered. I went downstairs, made a cup of tea, and settled onto the couch. My phone buzzed with a new text. Unknown number. This isn't over. The breath caught in my throat. Emily. I stared at the message for a long moment, then turned off the phone and set it face down on the coffee table. The house was quiet again, but now the silence felt less like peace and more like the calm before a storm.